Today's Match Masterclass is all about meat fishing. So if you want to up your meat fishing game, today's Match Masterclass is going to be for you. Oh, that one's on. That they're fizzing up, they're definitely feeding on the bottom. So I'm not going to refeed over the top of my float. Bam, there we go. I told you there was one waiting for us. Okay, so let's talk meat fishing. Now I will be completely honest with you, it's not a method that I do that often. Here in Norfolk, our venues very rarely seem to react well to it, but I know around the country it's mega at certain times of year, especially with venues with like skimmers, F1 carp, real mixed fishing because everything eats it. But there is definitely times of year which I use it here as well. And that is where we are now. We're coming out of winter, sorry, we're coming out of summer. We're now going into winter and those fish are definitely looking to feed up ready for the winter. It also works on the flip side in like the springtime, so when they're just waking up. So basically at the start of the season or the end of the season is a very, very good time for meat. And that's because the bait itself is very fatty, it's got a lot of salt content, and the fish are actively looking at those times of year for food that's going to help them put weight on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish while I'm talking to you now and just explain a little bit about it, because it is a bait that you have to be very, very careful with. There's a lot of venues that promote a 2-pint limit. I completely agree with that, and the way that I fish it, that's not going to affect anything anyway. Meat is a bait that you've got to be very, very careful with in the amount that you feed and when you feed it. Now we're going to come on to that, but basically it's a bait that sinks very slowly, it's very, very light, so the last thing you want to be doing is crashing loads of meat in, like where my rig is now stable, because it creates a real funny feeding situation. So feeding it is very, very important. I am going to do a section on that. And also, like I said, the amount of it as well. There we go, bang, bite. The amount is also very important. What I am going to do is just feed now. Again, don't worry, I will talk you through that later, but you only need to feed like 3 or 4 cubes. It's amazing how many fish you can catch on such little feed with this bait. And that's why I don't think a 2-pint limit, which is in place at a lot of fisheries, really makes a difference. So let me see if I can get this one in. I feel if I was feeding like pellets or anything, certainly this time of year when I think the fish are really having it, I would be putting loads in. I'd be feeling probably kilo, 2 kilos in a match, absolutely no problem. In me, it's a nuts to think that you can do the same reaction with literally 2 tins, and it's quite nice and cheap. So, well, there we go, face full of fish line for my efforts. A little mirror, we're going to catch fish a lot bigger than that, I'm sure. But like I said, it is a bait that's very, very good at catching absolutely everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and feel my way into the session now. There seems to be a couple of fish there because I caught one. I'm going to get them feeding properly, get the swim going, and then we'll have a proper look at the rigs, the baits, and like I said, the way that I'm feeding it. So let's get on with that next. There we go, couple of nice fish, and it gives me now the perfect opportunity to talk to you about the feeding. I've already mentioned with meat that it can get really messy if you just throw loads of bait at it because it's so oily, it sinks so slow, the fish just get in an absolute frenzy and they come up in the water, middle, bottom, they're all over the place and it's a nightmare. So with the feeding, I think this is the most important thing about this whole session. I'm literally feeding, you see I've got it here, a pinch of meat in my hand, probably 6 to 8 cubes. And I do like to fish short when I'm fishing meat, because I can just do what I've done there and I can throw it by hand. So that is literally enough, and it just literally amazes me how little you can feed. It's got to be the oil content, everything like that, that's holding them there for longer. Like I said, if it was pellets, I'd be absolutely rattling them in now, loads of noise, but this just doesn't require it. And one thing that you have to really, really try and force yourself not to do, and you might need to fight every urge in your body if you know, if you're a lot of match fishing, certainly in the warmer months, you want to feed a lot, try not to throw it over your float while your rig's in the water, because that's when you create liners, all sorts of funny indications, and that's not what you want to try and create. Hopefully that bait I threw in, oh, I missed a bite. Hopefully that has got down to the bottom and there's a few fish feeding. There's certainly some fish in the area. I can see some fizzing coming up. And again, refuse that urge. If I was fishing pellets, I keep saying it, as I missed that bite, I would have thrown another handful, but don't do it with meat. Look at that, they're fizzing up. They're definitely feeding on the bottom. So I'm not gonna refeed over the top of my float. Bam, there we go. I told you there was one waiting for us. Now, what I'm gonna try and do is guide it out of the swim. And now is when I feel we can sneak a bit of a feed in. So there we go. That's one pinch gone back in. My rig's not there. Hopefully they've spooked out of the way a little bit, disturbed themselves slightly. And as I'm playing this fish, it's the perfect time to throw that little pinch of bait in. If I'm playing it for a little while, I might throw another 5 or 6 cubes as well, but that will be it. Like I said, try your absolute best not to throw it over your float. Now, I am talking about what we're doing here. We're fishing on the bottom. We haven't got a shallow rig set up or anything like that. If I was in a match and I was really going for it, I would also have a shallow rig set up. And if they do, wow, this fish is going mental. If they do start coming up in the water, meat can be a great bait for fishing shallow because it sinks so slow and you can catch them that way as well. So perhaps, yeah, you perhaps have a couple of rigs set up, but I'm talking now when you're just trying to catch the bigger fish down on the bottom. This is how I would fish it, and we will show you the rig once we get this fish in, but it's certainly giving me the runaround. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw another little pinch of bait onto my spot. Bang, there we go. And I'm going to concentrate on getting this fish in. There we go. I can't believe how hard that pulls for a little fish. It's a cool one though, one to show you. I am fishing fairly light and we're going to go through the rig in a second. Whoa, calm down, calm down. You can tell that the hot weather is still giving them plenty of energy. Is it going to let me hold it up to you? It's a little linear. These were stocked in here a couple of years ago, a lot smaller than this. They're growing on nicely now, but yeah, they're cool looking fish. Right, let's not upset him anymore. That's going to go into the net, but it's a perfect time for me to talk you through the rig. What I'll do is while I'm doing that, I can just sneak in another 5 or 6 cubes of meat, like I said, because I don't want to be fishing or throwing it over my float when I'm fishing. So use these opportunities to feed your swim. So let me clip that up and we'll talk you through the rig, and then we're going to go out and try and catch one more. So as I've explained, in the way that you're feeding it, in the way that the bait sinks, you need to match your rig to suit that as well. I don't personally think you get the best out of it if it's a really heavy rig hammering it through to the bottom. You want to make a nice light fall, flutters down, and hopefully they grab it right at that last point. So elastic wise, because I said earlier, meat attracts everything, I do tend to fish a bit lighter. So I've got the orange slick, which I believe is 12 to 14. I've got 014 mainline. I've got a 0.3 gram of a float, which is a matrix stubby slim, and it's a carbon stem. That means I can lay my rig in and we can look for any bites as we fall through the water. So really important to have a light carbon stem float. Shotting wise, I've just got a trimming shot underneath it. And then a standard shotting pattern that I would use for a lot of my deck fishing, to be honest with you, is a strung out bulk with the spacing getting wider towards the hook end. So that means the last little section here is the section that sinks the slowest. A 4-inch hook link, and with meat, because you are burying a hook in it, you can fish a little bit bigger hook. So I've got 0.14 hook link, and I've got a size 14 hook on there, just because, like I said, it's quite an easy bait to bury your hook into. The only other addition I have in my rig, I pretty much have it all the while when I'm fishing on the deck, is I do have back shot. It just keeps this line above your rig nice and tight between your elastic and your float. So I mean, that's really not complicated. You can see how deep it is here. I always top kit my mark up my top kits. It's only 35, 36, 38 inches is all the depth that we're fishing. It's very shallow in this lake, but as I did mention, if it was, say, I don't know, another foot or so deeper than that, I would have another rig to fish through the water. But here I think we can get away with it. Let's feed another 5 or 6 cubes of meat and see if we can go out and catch another one. Let's go for a little cube, hooking it on. You literally are just, I mean, you're threading it on like a maggot really. Try and bury as much as the hook you can in the meat, but leaving the hook point exposed if you manage to catch one. So striking into them, you don't have to strike fully through the meat. So let's hopefully see if that meat has now sunk, and we'll try and catch another one. Again, resisting the urge to feed now. If I fed now, it would just make things worse. It's really not worth it. So we're going to set the trap and we are going to wait. If I was going to give you a time scale of how long to wait before feeding again, like I said, in certain scenarios you are going to have to feed over the top of your float, because I said it earlier, there's no point just sitting there if there's no fish in your swim at all. But I would certainly be happy sitting here without feeding for a good 3 or 4 minutes, because I know that there's still attraction there. I mean, I can see a fish swimming around the top, that's not interested, but there's the odd pin-picked bubble coming up. I'm getting a few indications on my float, so I know that there's fish there. I don't need to put any more cubes of meat in. By doing so, trust me, I would only make things worse. So, oh yeah, we're getting a few liners. There's clearly enough fish here just to carry on as we are at the moment without forcing things. So what I'm going to do is fish away now, try and catch a few more fish, and then the next thing we're going to look at is actually the meat itself, because obviously there's very many ways to prepare the meat. The actual meat you can buy, all sorts of stuff like that, but I keep it nice and simple, and that is what we're going to go on to next. So I'm going to catch a few more, and then we will have a look at meat preparation, or the meat that I'm using in today's session. So the last thing that I need to talk to you about is the meat itself. Why would we do a meat fishing video and not talk about the actual bait? Now, I don't use the conventional, let's say, Spam, but I know loads of people do. It used to be relatively cheap. I haven't brought any for ages now, but I think it's actually gone up in price, which is actually why I use specific fishing bait. But let's talk about the Spam to start with, if you do use that, because that is really awfully oily and hard to prepare. So what you want to do if you are using Spam is cube your meat up with your meat cutter. It's always best to use a meat cutter so it gets the same size meat. And I would then advise tipping a kettle, boiling water over the meat, and then drain all that water off, and then I would use it after that. So it's a bit of preparation at home if you're going to use spam, because there's just so much oil, it is really awkward. So that's if you're going to use conventional meat, but I'm far too lazy for that. And nowadays, Dynamite do some wicked meat that's still very, very oily, but you just don't need to mess around with the preparation. So there's loads of different flavours. That's the best thing as well, it's flavoured, so it's extra attraction there. But what I use, or what I'm using today, is just the sauce flavoured one. Now, I've got 2 tins of this, or 2 tubs of this. I've put it through a meat cutter. So take your time with it and try and get your cubes into a reasonable similarity in size, because we are throwing it and we want to make sure that we can get them all in that same area. And then all I do preparation wise, there isn't any really, just because it's so hot today. You can probably see in this tub there's a tiny bit, there you go, of water, and that's just a little pinch of water, and all that is to do is just to keep the meat from drying out. So every time I go in here and throw a pinch, I just give it a little stir, and that just recoats the water on the meat, so it means that it doesn't dry out. If it dries out, it actually floats. So there's a little bit of thinking to be careful with the bait, but certainly if you go down the route here of flavoured meat for fishing, it's not as hard and as time intensive to prepare as it is with the old meat. And I think I said it, like, it used to be pence of tin of spam, but I think actually now it's probably a similar price to actually flavoured fishing meat. So why not go for the stuff that's easy to prepare and a bit more flavour attraction? You can pick your favourite flavours and see what works for you. Like I said, sauce is the one that's good for me. So I fed a few handfuls there while I was talking for you. I'm going to go back in, see if we can finish with a flurry of fish. There's loads of little bubbles coming up now. There's fish definitely there. I'm really not encouraging them to come up in the water. We've kept feeding it in this way that we have all day, just to try and keep minimal amount, there we go, minimal amount of sort of attraction in the upper layers. And that's what happens then. You sort of line them up, feeding that meat without my rig in there, had them there absolutely perfectly. The fact that we're not using spam or meat content with ridiculous oil factor means that they're not coming up in the water too much. And that's the importance about, if you are going to use spam, wash it off with a boiled kettle first. Unless, this is the last little bit of information I'll give you, unless you are fishing shallow with it, then you want it to be exactly like it is out of tin, because you want it to sink slow, you want oil to come off, and you want to catch them very, very shallow in the water. But that isn't what we've been talking about today. So wash it off if you are going to fish it. There we go. How good was that? It doesn't always work like that when you've got a camera out there. It is a ridiculously hot day. It's been, I don't know, it's been way hotter than we expected it today, probably in the high 20s. So we said that the fish are feeding up ready for winter. They probably think it's full on summer at the moment. But there we go. Here's another one to show you. And it proves that when you get it right, calm down, you can cue them up and they're waiting for you to I'm getting absolutely beer. They're absolutely waiting for you to go in and catch another one. Why do none of these fish like to be shown on camera? Come on. I refuse to be beaten by it. There we go. Quick look at him. Little common, catches fish of absolutely, right, you've had enough. That is a thing of it, of all different sizes. That's going in the keep now. I am going to fish for another few minutes. I'm probably going to catch another 3 or 4 fish, and then we will show you what we've had and let these fellas swim away. there's another bite, and I'm probably going to call this one the last fish. It's been a good few hours fishing, and actually made me think a little bit. I probably should use meat a bit more often. I said to you, I don't use it too much. Apologies if you can hear them cutting the grass in the background. That is the joys of filming, unfortunately. But one last thing is worth mentioning on meat while I'm playing this fish. It's a very impact bait, and what I mean by that is it's not something that I would prime, so I wouldn't fish other lines and feed a meat line and then fish it later on. It's something that is very, very instant reaction, and with your 2 tin limit in most places, you don't want to be wasting it by feeding a few cubes here and there. So I would literally, as soon as I start feeding it, I would start fishing it, because it can be that attractive. And then at least it gives you an indication when you're fishing, you can see if the fish are reacting to how you're feeding. So they're not coming up in the water and they're actually sitting where you want them to sit. But there we go. That is a nice one to sign off on. Fish of all different sizes today. Really good fun session, and I hope I've managed to explain it to you in a way that makes it understand a few things that you can give a go in your own meat fishing. So I really do hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks as always for watching the Match Masterclass. Drop us a comment what you'd like to see next. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We're going to get these ones back and head off home.